So how can we grow? Now, ways to grow. जैसे आप सब लोग बोल रहे थे, acquiring new customers versus retaining existing customers. Chalo, let me ask a very interesting question. What do you think is a better way to grow? Acquiring new customers or retaining existing customers? See, there's a very famous statement by the chairman of YC, which was basically Sam Altman, who said that it's always good to have 100 customers that love you, then have 10 million users who like you. Now, if I always speak about this one thing, that investors can buy you acquisition, but they cannot drive retention, right? So I am a very strong fundamental proponent of that. If your retention is very heavily high, right, then your growth model is typically amazing. It does beautiful things to you because you are effectively, I will speak about those things, right? So retention is a silent killer, right? Retention is a very, very silent killer. Now, this is how typically your WAU hota hai, weekly active users, and it's fake data, right? It's not, it's taken from Reforge, right? So what you effectively see is, see, the company is growing active users, and eventually it's stalemating at a certain point, right? Now I want to understand, I just spoke about something that it is repeatable, sustainable, consistently growing, but in this particular metric, what you effectively realize is that people are stalemating at a certain point. Why is it happening? Why is it happening? So I spoke about that retention is a very amazing thing, because if you build very strong retention in the product from a value proposition standpoint, people are going to come and they're not going to leave. One of the examples that I gave you was Duolingo, right? Yes, obviously we will have to see. Let's not talk about edge cases. I'm talking about very fundamental growth, right? Now I have a very interesting question. I just told growth is scalable, measurable, repeatable, predictable, right? Now, but here what you see is some data that you're growing, and it's stalemated. What does it mean by in this graph? While we were in IIT JEE, right, we always used to say na कि graph से हम figure out करते थे. Tell me, what does this graph tell you? Like your weekly active users have stalemated at 100,000 and now it's not growing. It tells you two things, two very interesting things. I need answers. Does not have wow factor? Not really. What's there? What's next? Okay. Okay. Yes, it's a mature product. Correct. The reason is, this graph is not fluctuating. It is telling you that it's consistent at 100,000 users. What it effectively tells you is that you have a great retention, which is there, right? People are still active on your platform. The only thing is that they are not cumulatively growing. What I mean by that is that your acquisition currently is not supporting your retention. Yes. So logically, if your weekly active users are not going down, means you have a decent retention, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that retention is translating into more referrals, right? So it has lost its virality coefficient. Another thing that I want to tell you is, see, no, it's not about the end of product life cycle, Ashish. It is about your product does not have a great virality coefficient. What I mean by virality coefficient is, right? Yes, virality coefficient is that your users are finding it valuable, but not valuable enough to refer other users. Yes, virality coefficient hota hai one customer that you acquire after having a service, doing a service, how many users he refers by himself. Yes, correct. So what effectively it means that your platform is providing value, but only by you're bringing users inorganically and they're finding value, they're retaining on the platform. Agreed. But they are not getting enough value to effectively refer other people. Since how will you be viral, right? It's not a marketing ploy, it's a product ploy, right? Virality basically means it is driving retention, right? So I just quickly said that. NPS is not a good metric for virality. NPS is a baseline metric. I'll speak about that. So, what did you take away from this? That your product is driving retention, which is fair, right? But it is not driving users enough to refer other users. Now, one more thing that you can figure from here: the company which has a great product, they don't build referral programs. They build very simple referral programs, right? So, but on the contrary, Uber didn't have a very good retention, right? Because Ola was there. That's why they had to pay. What do you figure out? What do you figure out from this? That there are two kinds of viralities, right? If your product has good retention plus virality, like your product is top notch, right? At that level, what you will fundamentally understand is that your referral programs by automatically will get designed by themselves, right? Correct, it should ideally do that, right? But here it's not doing that. You understand? So the point that I'm trying to put across is growth models are self-sustaining, right? It's like a perpetual model. You understand? Until and unless you consume the market, right? Which is a very large edge case. Like if you look at edtech as an ecosystem, it's a huge market. Well, anywhere in the next 20 years, it's not going to get consumed, right? So what did you take away from this very important insight? Retention can be there, doesn't guarantee virality all the time. A product which has insane retention and virality is a self-sustaining growth loop, right? Okay, let me give you an example of. Have you heard of Amul? Isn't Amul a viral product? What do you guys say? What do you guys say? Give me an answer. Is Amul a right example of virality? Yes. Amazing. Right? Acha. Diti had asked, when do we know the market is saturated? We realize when the market is saturated, when market has a growth structure, right? You already know that education is a $400 billion opportunity. If you kind of have an understanding that you own 30-40% of the market, that's the point when you can think of saturation. Ki, haan yaar, this is something I want to move into some other area, right? So, guys, what did you take away from this graph? That retention doesn't always drive viral. So, three layers are there. If you have a product which doesn't have retention, you're screwed anyway, right? It has good retention, doesn't mean virality. If it has retention plus virality, you have hit gold, right? Chalo. Another thing, very interesting. The most of the people up now, you're seeing two graphs, right? The retention curve flattens at most places, and it is going down. Why I have written good and bad? Why now I have explained the previous slide. You need to tell me why the blue line is good and why the I am colorblind, guys. Sorry, whatever, it's blue, it's yellow, orange, whatever it is, it's bad, right? So tell me this across. Why have I written good and bad? So the green line fundamentally means that your product acquired a lot of customers where people are not retaining, right? Whereas the good customers, it tells you two important things, right? That out of every 100 people, around 50% of your people effectively are retained users, which means that you have, like, out of 100 users, 50 users provide you a service which is of higher LTV, right? What I mean by that is that, let's assume, when you look at a funnel, out of 100 users acquired by user on Uber, 20 users book a cab, and if it stays over there, so they have some sort of a growth understanding from, like, if you have 100 users and you effectively if the line is at 50% of the users, you means out of Every 100 users, 50% users get activated with time. Understood this part? That you have your activation coefficient in the graph. You understand that out of your 100 users, 50 users in the curve are fundamentally activated and will use your platform. So when your growth curves flattens, that is the state, that is the point when you try to understand this. Now, after a certain usage of your product, if 50% of users are coming back, why are they coming back? Right? It's okay, Vedant. It's fine. Why are they coming back? Because they find value, right? What do you mean by value? Somebody activated, right? Unless and until they got activated, what's the point of for them to come back? But this steady state line, this line effectively gives you a benchmark of out of every 100 users, what percentage of users are you actually able to activate, not the dropping line. Because the dropping line initially also talks about, okay, there might be some experimental users, there might be some users who just want to put across some, use the product once. But this standard flat line tells on an average minimum 50% of your users are retained users who will consistently use your service, and hence this will give you a benchmark of how good your product is. Like out of 100 users you acquire, 50% users are there who are fundamentally like, okay, I am going to use the service again and again. But if this number is consistently dropping, it tells you that you are not able to retain users and they're not finding value. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So whenever in a growth curve you see a flattened curve is good. It's not bad. It just tells you what is the benchmark of activation that you're able to hit. Does that make sense? Now I have shown another curve. Here it's growing very rapidly. What does this mean? I just explained it across. Yes, it is retention plus virality. Awesome. Very cool. Now we'll talk about something very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. How do you drive sustainable growth? Right? अब growth में आप सबने सुना है कि श्रवण भैया talks about funnels and stuff like that, but today we'll not talk about funnels. Funnels नहीं पढ़ेंगे यार. Funnels are very bad actually. पता है, मैं I want to give you a glimpse of what is sustainable growth, right? So now can people tell me why funnels are bad? Yeah. Can people tell me why funnels are bad? General thought process. What is a funnel? People respond, I want more responses. What is a funnel?